This is Conversations on Discipleship with Father Adam Streitenberger from St. Gabriel Catholic Radio and Diocese of Columbus Media.
Welcome to Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is my good friend, Pat Martin. Pat, welcome.
Hi. Nice to see you.
Great to have you. Yeah, great to have you. Let's start with a prayer in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, we give you thanks for this day and for this time together. We ask that you bless our conversation, bless all of our listeners, that they may be ever attentive to your presence in their lives. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, Pat, as we kind of begin this conversation, and as always on this show, Conversations on Discipleship, we kind of want to hear what your story of faith is. Now, a lot of times those are conversion stories, but I know that you've been a saint ever since your baptism. So maybe you can explain to us and tell us what it's like to be a saint.
Be a saint. It's hard. It's dealing with the sinners that makes it really difficult to be a saint.
So you are from the south side of Columbus.
Right. I'm one of those cradle Catholics from St. Leo's, which, was involved in a big controversy when they tried to actually close the church and discovered that it actually was deeded to the people of St. Leo Parish rather than the Diocese of Columbus. And it's now open again as one of the, I think, entirely Latin masses.
Yeah, it's now the Oratory of St. Leo.
The Oratory of St. Leo,
the
right.
Community of the Missal of 1962.
Right, and I went back there during the 40 days of adoration, and it was, had been restored pretty much the way I remembered it from when I was in school there. So I went to school, had the Franciscan sisters from Stella Niagara for 8 years, and then moved on to the Dominicans for another 8.
Now, both of your parents were Catholic. I vaguely
No, my dad was not a Catholic.
He wasn't.
He was not a Catholic until I was in, I think, 6th grade, and that was pre-RCIA, so he took his instructions at our kitchen table with Father Lowry and, a couple of beers. So,
and then he was involved in the Legion of Mary, wasn't he?
He was. He was involved in the Legion of Mary, and I think they met every week, and then they would go out in twos to visit people who had fallen away from the church.
And we talk so much about evangelization because it's the most important thing that we do. And the Legion of Mary is actually a wonderful, phenomenal, model for evangelization where, people committed to prayer and ongoing formation together, and they would go out. Especially to fallen away Catholics.
Right. They would go out. They'd have a list, I think, from the pastor, and they would meet and say their prayers, and then they'd go out into, with many times with converts, of course, it's like, oh, here's a new one. So everything they needed a volunteer for, he helped run the parish festival and, all those kinds of things. But he did do the Legion of Mary for a long time. And for a long time I had, the prayer I carried, in my prayer book, their prayer that they said.
And what was your prayer life like growing up in this home?
We started every day at school. Every day started with Mass. And you even had to go to 8:30 Mass on Sunday. And if you weren't there, then you had to bring a note for why you weren't there. A lot different than now. And, a lot of prayer in school. Lots of devotions at that time. I remember going to the Fatima devotions. That was kind of just starting when I was coming through school. And so the Fatima devotions go with my mom every Friday night. And my brother and my sisters go every Friday night. And there was always a parish mission. Stations of the Cross, Wednesdays and Fridays. So a lot of those.
Did you pray the rosary at home as a family, or?
Not usually, no. But we always had I always had a May altar, and so we did that, but not usually.
And obviously, they taught you the prayers growing up.
They did, and I remember when I would stay with my grandmother, down in southeastern Ohio. I can remember her when I would be in bed, she would be kneeling by the side of my bed saying the rosary. And that's basically how I learned to say the rosary. And some other prayers. Some of them, I'm not sure exactly where she got them, but
That was down in Gloucester. Is that
was
where she
down
was
in
at?
Gloucester, right. She was from Gloucester. And, when my parents got married, at that time, because my father wasn't Catholic, they couldn't get married in the church building. They had to get married in the rectory because he wasn't Catholic.
Yeah, that I've heard lots of stories about that. Those sort of rectory weddings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and then you went to St. Leo's
I went
grade
to St.
school,
Leo's.
and then to
St. Mary's of the Springs Academy,
Okay.
which was an all-girls school. And that was one of the biggest arguments I ever had with my parents because I wanted to go to Hartley. Because Hartley was new and most of my friends were going to Hartley, but my brother had gone to St. Charles, so I had to go to the Springs. And so anyway, that's settled. Ended up being glad that I did. Not that I wouldn't have gotten as good an education at Hartley, but I think that whole Dominican emphasis on philosophy and that was really, really good. Looking back on it, it's always better when you look back on it than
Yeah.
at the time.
If you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship, and I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. Pat, how did the Dominican sisters who were involved in your education there at the Springs, what kind of lasting influence has that left in your life?
Well,
that sort of Dominican spirituality.
Yeah, and I think part of it was discipline. I think even as freshmen, they had the sodality and they taught, you could do mental prayer, trying to learn mental prayer, which I found really hard. It's really difficult to do, to sort of focus like that and, get involved with the transcendent. I
So
guess.
almost like practicing like meditation, contemplation, they had that worked into the system.
It was worked into the system, and then the sodality was you could volunteer. That was voluntary, but working, that whole idea of mental prayer and I think the discipline, and then I went to the college as well. And so at that time, I was thinking, even in the college, I was trying to remember how many lay teachers I had, and I think I only had two. I think one for Western civilization and one for Spanish. And everything else was taught either by Dominican sisters or the friars. The friars taught all the philosophy, all the theology, psychology, and sociology were all taught by Dominican friars.
Now, where did you go to college at?
The Springs, St. Mary of the
okay.
Springs, which is now Ohio Dominican.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Not the same Ohio Dominican I went to. I'll just throw that in. But
we're not going to touch that.
we're not going to touch that
one. So I think maybe in your college years, so it was an all-girls college.
It was until my junior year, and that
Okay.
was the year they decided to admit.
Yeah.
And that's a whole that's a whole other story. And I think there were 4 men who applied, and we were successful in getting 3 of them to decide they really didn't want to stay. But there was one that just
So you chased out 3.
yes,
Yeah.
there was one that just wouldn't go.
Now,
We had the priests on our side too, I will say.
So, and then after college, so Scott, your husband, when did you meet him?
Actually, I met him when I was in high school.
Okay.
We both worked for Kroger's.
Ah.
And then I went to college, he went in the military, and then we sort of reconnected after I got out of school, and he was back. So.
And marriage and children and all of that together.
All of that together, yeah.
Yeah. Where were you parishioners at?
Well, initially at Christ the King, and then St. Catherine's for a long time. The kids all went to school at St. Catherine's and Hartley.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably for the last 20 years at St. Matthew's.
What about as if we kind of go through this stage of your life as a wife and as a mother, how did you instill the faith or attempt to instill the faith into your children?
Well, we talked a lot about, of course, everybody went to Mass, and, the sacraments were involved in their sacraments. And, at that time, there really weren't as many, I will say, there weren't as many things for families, as emphasis on family as there is now. for and resources and that type of thing. So you were kind of on your own, but everybody went to Mass. We always went as a family to Mass. And then, as I said, with all their sacraments.
But I mean, it probably, I think you came from a culture where families raised kids in the faith. And like there was sort of an organic way, not only a culture that supported it, but it's almost like the families were naturally equipped to raise kids in the faith. Something obviously happened. I don't know what it was. But, like where now it is a struggle, and it seems like in order for us to raise kids in the faith, we have to depend on institutions. We have to depend on the school to do it, or the parish catechetical program to do it, or the parish to do it, or, whatever it is. We've kind of lost that sense where the family can kind of organically pass on the faith and raise them.
I think that's true, and I think part of it goes back to the parents who weren't, I guess, raised as strictly in the faith. You just kind of saw it gradually decrease through the years. Like I came from a very strict family, even though my dad wasn't Catholic. If my mother was not there, you still didn't eat meat on Friday, and you still went to Mass, and all those kinds of things. So he very much reinforced that Catholic faith, even though at the time, like as I said, until I was in 6th grade, he was not Catholic. But he reinforced that, and I think that's what we're losing, is you just don't have that anymore. So, because parents, I don't think, are well educated in the faith, because probably even now their parents weren't. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have that all the way through. Even in the schools, I'm not that familiar with the Catholic school system now because all our kids are out. But the faith was really reinforced in the school.
Yeah.
Everything, all the subjects somehow or other worked their way back around.
Yeah.
To faith. I mean, we had Bible study, and even in music class there were a lot of hymns. I mean, there were other songs as well, but you learned the hymns, and as I said, you went to Mass every day. You participated in all the Lenten devotions. Anytime there was anything, you were there. Yeah, you were supposedly on vacation during Holy Week, but not really, because you were expected to be at all of the services. And your parents made sure that you were. Even the parents who were maybe not as strict about their religion still reinforced that with their kids.
Yeah.
Even though maybe they didn't go every time, their kids went all the time.
If you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. Pat, I wanted to kind of push on you. Now, I know that you're a huge fan of Bishop Barron because you love to give me all of his books, his newest books, which I love to receive from you.
Always ask for.
I'm always willing to accept free gifts. Well, there's no free gifts, are there?
No free, nothing's free.
But I want to kind of talk about like this. This really interesting point I think you bring up, and your story kind of brings up about. We've really failed, it seems like, generation after generation. It gets worse and worse, our ability to hand out. Now, some of that is a mathematical problem because, the fewer Catholics you have, obviously, the fewer they're going to pass it on to fewer.
I think it's what he refers to as dumbing down the faith.
Yeah.
I think that the church has perhaps underestimated people's ability to really look at the faith and look at some philosophy, and I'm not talking Thomas Aquinas, whose feast day is tomorrow, by the way. You don't have to be able to read the Summa.
Yeah.
But I think most people, even kids, even 6th, 7th, 8th graders, high school kids certainly, can grasp some of the basic philosophy, the background of the faith. I think that's maybe where we've sort of gone off the rails a little bit.
While I do agree with that, I do think that a lot of teachers of the faith think that people aren't as smart as they actually are, and that they can actually figure these things out. One of the things I really see is we don't want to deal with people's questions. We don't want them to have to wrestle with the truth, because
It's hard.
It's hard, and it's messy, because everyone wants everyone to, we want people to be saved. We don't want them to become heretics or apostatize from the faith or something like that. But we also need to recognize that they need to kind of question and poke at these truths that we're proposing to them. We can't just say, "Hey, this is what we believe. You better accept it and fall into uniformity now." Or
Yeah, and I think we need to. That's my sense, is that maybe it's because people feel they can't answer the question, or they're afraid of what the question's going to be. Maybe they've had the same questions themselves that they've never been able to come to some resolution with. But I think I would rather a kid or somebody going into college would ask me than wait until some professor at one of the public schools decides they're going to give him the answer, and we know what that's going to be. I would rather put it out there. If somebody says, I don't know if I believe that. Why should I believe that? I don't think I believe that. And, some of the articles that come out say kids have lost their faith by 13 or 14.
Yeah.
They're on their way out of the church. I mean, they do all the things. Yes, they do confirmation and those kinds of things. But I remember when my son was being confirmed that Monsignor Sorahan said that he had one student. They all met with him before confirmation, and he said he had one student who said, "I'm not sure I want to do this." And he said, "Okay, well, we can talk about it." And he said he told the parents, they don't really want to do it. And of course, he said the parents weren't ballistic, and he said, "No, that we're asking a big commitment here, and we need to resolve this. We need to talk about it." Well, the kid was confirmed the next year. He wanted to do it. But I think not allowing people to question is a big problem, especially when they go to college. I said it's like sending somebody into battle with no weapons. So I think we kind of do them a disservice by not letting them feel like I can say, "I'm not sure about this." And that's okay, because then we know where to go with it.
And I think that the number 13, which is sort of the average age when people leave the faith, that leave the Catholic faith, part of that number, part of the reason why that's so low is the people who are baptized and just they never come back again, But so that drags the average down. But the 13, I mean, to your point, is that's a time of great wrestling and anxiety about who they are, but then also these issues that they face in school, which are legitimate, science, faith and reason. How do I interpret Scripture consistently with these truths that I'm learning as I kind of pursue scientific and mathematical knowledge?
And I think that can be addressed. Say, science and religion are not incompatible.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that needs to be looked at in the curriculum. How do you address that? Even if somebody doesn't ask, it's there.
Well, I can tell you. Well, first of all, if you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. But as we talk about faith and science and this wrestling with the truth, which we've been talking about throughout this conversation, I can tell you that in the Diocese of Columbus, only because I had to sit through a 6-hour meeting, last week, is the question of science and faith and reason is being dealt with now in the religion curriculum in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So,
good for the Diocese of Columbus.
there's great things happening. So, lest they think we're just doom and gloom. So. I think, back to kind of the initial little trigger on this point too with Bishop Barron. One of the things I know that you really like about him is this appreciation of beauty. Now I think we've talked quite a bit of the need to appreciate truth, which is part of your Dominican formation, from the good sisters. I think, but there's also this sense of beauty, which Bishop Barron talks about quite a bit.
Right, he does, almost as like the entryway into uh, spirituality, and it makes sense. If you, I'm not surprised that people don't believe in the real presence
Mm.
and necessarily don't believe in God because.
Why are you not surprised that people don't believe in the real
Well,
presence?
I think people have lost a sense of wonder and awe, curiosity, imagination. If you ask kids to tell you a story, well, when I was growing up, you'd make all kinds of stuff, you know. And now it's more like if you really listen to what they're telling you, it's something from a video game or it's something from Marvel Comics or something like that. It's very concrete, even though it's fictional, it's still kind of concrete. It's not something that's coming from, their own mind where they've been thinking about this and kind of letting their mind wander. And I think when you lose that, how do you make a leap to the transcendent? If you don't appreciate, say, I mean, we've had at the, Toro, I don't know, a few months ago, we've had these great sunrises in the morning. I mean, just really breathtaking. Well, if you can't make the leap to appreciate that, and there's your sense of wonder. Where did that come from? Well, if all it is a bunch of dust particles flying through the air and hitting the sun, kind of hard to make the leap to God did that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can just look at that and let go and just appreciate it, and then kind of your mind will sort of move on to the transcendent, I think, if you let it. And the other thing is to do that, you have to be quiet. This doesn't happen in all the noise. You have to unplug yourself. And people are really, really uncomfortable with silence. I mean, they can't stand it.
Yeah, it's belly gazing, which is one of the things I hate. We get drawn into ourselves and we lose sight of what's outside of us. And part of that, I think, is that we don't really live in contact with reality. There are thousands. I could probably go on for 60 minutes on just a sheer list of ways in which we try to escape reality. And it does seem that we're drawn into ourselves, it's a product of the fall. I mean, that's, as Thomas says, we turn from God and into ourselves.
And the reality is just what we see. And that kind of goes back to that science thing. It's what we see, what we can prove. We've lost that other dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't have that
a sense of
extra
mystery.
dimension. That sense of mystery, that's the other thing, a sense of mystery.
Which, if you look at the history of the human race, every culture has had a sense of mystery. We'd also could even say every culture has been religious. There has been some sort of religion. Which then makes you think, well, if every culture and if every person has looked for this, it is this argument, the argument from desire. So, say, for instance, you have thirst, and, you're thirsty. Well, there's got to be something out there that fulfills you if you have this desire, and obviously it's water, So we can prove the existence of water from your thirst for it. In the same way, it's clear every culture has desired a relationship with the mystery, with the divine. It's always this desire is built into each of us.
It's the fact that there's never enough. I mean, no matter how much you have, it's never enough.
Yeah,
you see that. We want more, and that didn't do it. Well, I want this, and that doesn't do it.
There has to be an infinite fulfillment to this infinite desire, and we obviously we know this person and that his name is Jesus. So. You've been listening to Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today has been Pat Martin. We're continuing our conversation. So, Pat, I think specifically beauty, we talk about the sunset and everything, but I think even in the life of the church, there have been times where we lose sight of beauty?
I think so. I think that's true. I think, Mass can become sort of, oh yeah, here I am, But one of the things I notice is like at St. Matthew's during Lenten Advent for the glory, well, not the Gloria, that's saved for, Christmas and the Easter Vigil, but the Santos, the Agnus Dei are in Latin. And there's something about, I know people hate Latin. I'm sorry. I had to take Latin, so deal with it. But one of my 4 kids actually took Latin. I actually talked her into taking Latin, and she's never forgiven me. But
Scarring.
there's something about that. Even just switching, I wouldn't. I'm not advocating let's all go back to the Latin Mass. That's impressive, though. That really is impressive. But there's something about that switch, like at the Santos and the Agnus Dei, that gets your attention. It's like, oh, this is a shift.
Mm-hmm.
Something special's happening here. And that's part of it. It's that chant. There's just something about that.
Well,
Makes your mind shift.
And I think that's the whole point of a liturgical language, is that it draws us out of the market and out, the marketplace and the street and the home into a new world. It kind of sets it off. That was the intention with the new translation of the Mass in English, that the language not be so kind of common, but be something that, with words that you would not ordinarily use on the streets, like consubstantial and things like that, Like there's a purpose in that. But even these liturgical languages, that's always been a part of human culture. If you look at, the Jews use Hebrew. Hebrew's a dead language, The Muslims, like the Quran has to be in Arabic for it to be the Quran. And most Muslims, Arabic is not their first language. And in some ways it's really only been preserved because of the Quran around the world. So, but like there's this sense where a sacred language is key because it breaks us out of our comfort zone, that we're in the presence of the divine. And I think the same with chant too. Is chant's not street music.
It's not.
It's and especially like if it pulls us out of our comfort zone, like what's normal.
It does.
And it gives a sense of the sacred.
There's something about like at midnight Mass or the Easter Vigil, for the Gloria.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes out in Latin, it's something like, wow, this is really special. This is really joyful.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes it's just different. The Gloria in English is fine, but there's something about that change, that Latin that makes it, and I know people sit there and it's like, my kids are like, what is it?
Well, and it's obvious from this point in our conversation that we're not musicologists at all, But I will say that, joyful music is not dependent upon the rhythm or the beat. And I think that's a key thing. If you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. So Pat, again, like kind of preserving this beauty in the liturgy, but in the life of the church. And I think also part of that is architecture and the imagery that we use, both quality, but also, it really does kind of point to the divine.
It does, and St. Matt's a year or so ago had an open house at the church just to let people come and see kind of what goes on here, and opened it up to the community, and someone was there, and we're talking about the windows, the stained glass windows, and explaining what those are and,
Mm-hmm.
What they represent and that time. And she, just really impressed. And it's like, wow, this is really so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And the rose windows and, all those symbols are so attractive. And most you just kind of come in and sit down. It's like, yeah, well, there's a window, but being able to kind of get lost, and sometimes those are a good trigger for meditation or contemplation. We talked about that, about trying to encourage
Yeah.
meditation. But again, if you can't get past the concrete, it's really hard to do. How are you going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
You can't make that step into the transcendent if you're not able to get out of the world as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as we kind of wrap up on beauty, and I think the importance of it is, we know that the Lord Himself is the beauty. He is beauty, and that's the attractiveness and the power of it. If you are tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship, and I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me is Pat Martin. Pat, I wanted this was something that you had mentioned in your kind of the story, especially what the sisters helped to instill in you at the Springs about mental prayer, contemplation, and meditation. And I know your wise and beloved pastor, Father Sill, had mentioned to me the other day that like, how do we help to form people in prayer more in the parish? And it is an important, we have to know how to pray. To be a missionary disciple means that we have this sort of ongoing prayerful relationship with the Lord. And contemplation and meditation is key. And I think it connects to a lot of the points that we've been making. And, one of the things is this sense of silence, the need for silence, the need to kind of allow sort of our imagination even to think beyond ourselves. And maybe that is part of the problem with the real presence, is that we, it's hard for us to recognize the presence of the Lord.
I think so, and I think we're not really going to grasp transubstantiation. I figure if Aquinas couldn't do it, I'm not going to do it either. But to at least open your mind to, like, yeah, the Lord is here. And I think it's a process. I think you start with silence. So have your group or whoever just be silent, and then say, okay, now focus on something. Like, if we're at St. Matt, say, well, I want you to focus on the rose window.
Yeah.
And I just want you to let your mind go. And, what are you thinking about? Look at that. I mean, you really look at it, and where does your mind go from there? That's kind of a little start. I think you have to gradually build up to that. You can't just
as long as, and I think
mental
a key
prayer.
is with mental prayer is that, because, it's not like we're Buddhists or Hindus, we're actually talking to God. Like, that's the whole point of our meditation is it's a focus on the Lord and a communing with Him and being in His presence, and really allowing our hearts to be with Him and to speak to Him one-on-one. And we can use our imagination either from the scriptures, kind of reading the scriptures prayerfully. We can use, religious imagery to kind of focus us in. I do believe one of the reasons why the Lord instituted the sacrament of the Eucharist is so that we have a focal point to concentrate on, to be, when we want to be in His presence and in communion with Him, So all of those things, we kind of use those to get us to the point of being with the Lord and to being kind of resting in His presence.
Yeah, but I think you have to start with simple things like silence, just being quiet.
Yeah.
And then sort of moving on, gradually to that. But I think, we're starting our perpetual adoration again in February, and, just to sit in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. And just sit there and, maybe not have any great expectations at first, but just to sit there in silence and focus and open your mind.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think, people expect some sort of conversion of Paul experience every time they come to pray, or like some sort of Pentecost moment every time they're in prayer. But it's really a relationship with the Lord, and prayer is our time with Him. And sometimes it's just being in that presence. There's nothing profound to write about, other than His love for me and that I know He's there. And I might not feel much at all. I might not experience much at all. But it's there. It's kind of, I would imagine in a friendship or, a relationship, probably even husband and wife over many, many years, if they actually counted the amount of experiences where they, had some sort of great memory, most of their time together, sitting on the couch, watching television together, or, sitting at table, eating together, or cleaning the house together, or, it's just being in the presence of each other. And
I think that's a good point about the expectation.
yeah,
You might not have this great revelation, but there's a certain feeling, a certain comfort, even though it's nothing that you maybe don't feel at that moment or you can't really express, but there's just something that there is someone there, or something's going on here. I don't know exactly what it is, but something's happening here.
yeah. If you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. Pat, I wanted to kind of move from mental prayer. So, one of the things I love about you that's very entertaining is your Irish nationalism, which
Although they've really gone off the rails, that.
I emphasize nationalism.
Should we tell a story? No, we better not tell a story.
So, how is your? I mean, the Irish have been Catholic since Patrick came.
Until lately.
The church in Ireland has collapsed, and I think people may not realize that. It was a huge and epic collapse. It's not pretty and it's not good. But I do think, unfortunately, the Irish have this great legacy of faith, of the missionaries they sent out all over the world. Like St. Patrick is the patron saint of Nigeria. And you ask, like, why are they so devoted to St. Patrick? Well, it's because the Irish came and converted them. Like that was their, and how many local churches, dioceses throughout the United States had Irish bishops and Irish priests that really manned it.
This was missionary territory for them.
Yeah. So, but there is, because there are scads of books written on Celtic spirituality and this sort of Irish spirituality. So, I don't know, what is it about your Irishness that has influenced your faith?
I think that's part of it, because the Irish are very much involved with nature, and of course they came from the Druids before Patrick, or at his time, but very much connected to nature. Mm-hmm. And then it was really not a great leap for them when Patrick came to convert them, because they already had this connection with another level, another world, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't any great leap for them to accept.
Well, they saw the mystery.
They saw the mystery.
Even, who knows what the Druids did out in the woods, but at least they were able to recognize the divinity somehow. And they were able to somehow recognize him through the natural world.
And, and it was that sense of mystery, but very, very open to that.
Yeah.
Who else believes in little green men, with pots of gold? But they really were open to that. It was not unusual for them, to accept the transcendent. I mean, that was just part of who they were. That was part of their culture. So it was not difficult.
And, now the Irish tend to be very penitential. Irish spirituality tends to be very penitential. Obviously, you have taken that upon yourself as well.
Not so much. I'm not. I have no interest in going out to this distant island in the Irish Sea and climbing up on my knees to the top. I'm not really.
Yeah. Well, but
I didn't get that part.
I do think, why the need for the sacrament of confession. How important has that been in your life?
It's pretty important. I know people who haven't been to confession since their first communion, but I try to go every couple months.
Yeah.
And just go. And people say, "Really?" I say, "Yeah, really."
What do you find there in the sacrament of confession?
I think it's just, for one thing, it's humbling. It sort of knocks the pride out of you a little bit. And just being able to hear the words, "I absolve you from your sins." It's one thing to say, "Okay, well, I'm going to talk to God about this, and God forgave me," but I would like a little more concrete proof of that. I like to hear somebody actually say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you really do look at what you've done and really try to do better. So, and at least for a period of time after you go, you're thinking, "Oops, I'm sly. I'm not supposed to do that. I was going to really work on that."
Yeah.
So it kind of
There's
makes you
an
aware of what
accountability.
you're doing.
Yeah.
There is.
That's why regular confession is so key. I go once a week usually.
Well, you would need to, but
But I think mainly I go once a week because my memory is not so good, in the sense that it's easy to lose track of where I've gone off the rails, and I think having that time that's easier for me. It's a smaller period to look back at, to kind of inventory where I've and examine my conscience about where I've fallen, and it's
and sometimes you think, "Oh, well, it's just the same thing." I'm sure the priest is tired of hearing this. It's the same old thing. But then it's like, well, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
So you need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, and I think, having heard confessions, they all kind of sound the same, honestly. There's a few little new things ever so often, but really, most people are falling into about a dozen different, sins. But, that should not, it should not surprise us that we fall into the same sin, first of all, because we're the same person. Second, human nature has not changed.
It's never changed.
Since the fall. But I also think that, we fall into habits, and we have weaknesses.
Can I tell you a funny story that
Sure.
Father O told? Remember Father O?
Father Ogrechuk, the great Father Ogrechuk.
He said when he was first ordained, and he was at St. Leo's, actually, that was his first parish, and he said that the first time he heard confessions there, he took a lot of his books with him, his theology books, in case somebody had a question, and so he carried all these books into the confessional with him, and he said it was, I lied to my mom, I disobeyed my dad, and, for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that was the last time I ever took my books with me. But he was expecting some great question that was going to come his way. But, as you said, it's routine. And you're right, it's the same thing. Even though my memory is not as good as it used to be either, so now I put it in my phone and take my phone with me. I don't want to forget anything.
If you're tuning in, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. Pat, I think, and I know you from St. Matthew's when I was an associate there, and, we've had a long friendship since then. You would
Even
come down
to Portsmouth.
You would come down to Portsmouth and visit me and bring me meals and suppers and things like that.
And he would immediately go to sleep and leave the dishes.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
As long as we're speaking of confession.
Yeah. Well, if it wasn't so carb heavy, maybe that was it. But I think so. One, the parish, and you were at Christ the King. You said you were at St. Catherine's. You were at St. Matthew's. The parish is very important to you in your life, and I wondered if you could kind of talk about the importance of parish and being involved in the parish.
Okay, I think it is. I mean, we have, for example, we have our little 6:30 group of people who are the regular 6:30 a.m. people, and there's a group of us that do breakfast usually with Father Cyril like once a month, and remember each other's birthdays. And if you're not there and haven't reported why you weren't going to be there, you could expect a phone call or an email. Are you okay? Because where were you this morning? Which is kind of nice.
Community is what
community.
it is.
It's really nice, and so we have a lot of other friends, that we do things with and go to Bible studies with and those kinds of things. So it's like a community, and it kind of reinforces your faith, and you meet some good people, and you learn. I learned a lot of things from different people and find different resources and things like that. So it's really interesting. Like before I came here, I was killing time at Panera, and there was a men's prayer group that meets at Panera, that's formed from that 6:30 Mass group, although there wasn't much praying going on this morning. There was lots of laughing and just disruptive behavior. But so it's just kind of nice to have that, and to have that backup, and to know that there's always somebody there. And the other thing is, I get text all the time, would you pray for so-and-so, or my sister's husband has this, would you? So I put my prayer list in my phone now. I picked that up from Father Cyril because I can't remember all these people. So I just put the list in my phone. Do I pray for every day? You're included.
Great.
And who's ill. So that's another separate list, because the extra prayers over here for this person who's ill. And even some people that I don't know, but somebody else in my little 6:30 Mass group might know. Well, would you pray for this person? Or would you pray for my sister-in-law's friends? Like, okay. So, and sometimes that's just how it's listed in my thing. So-and-so's sister-in-law's friend, you know who it is. And then, of course, I always add, and anyone else I forgot, because you know this list better than me. And some days I just want to say, dear God, run the list.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that too with the list. I'm like, Lord.
You know who's on the list.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're tired of hearing this. So.
But I what about new parishioners? So I think especially when we're active and involved, and we have kind of our community and perhaps even our routine in the life of the parish, still this openness to new people. And before you answer that, just remind you all, this is Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today is Pat Martin. So Pat, how do we kind of, I think, stay open to the new people?
Well, I think they do have. We have like a donut social once a month for all the new parishioners. And as people get involved in things, they have Women Walking with Purpose. So some of the new people come in that. There's a men's group for people that. And, I've been an RCIA sponsor several times. And that's, I know when I sponsored my next door neighbor, he said, I said, I learn as much from you as you learn from me. And he couldn't believe that. I said, yeah, really, I learned as much from you. And every time I go to one of the, go through a period of that, it's like a renewal yourself. And you're always learning something that you didn't know or you forgot. So that's another group, the RCIA group. And they really are a good group, and I keep after mine. My neighbor hasn't been as regular as he should be, so now he hides from me when he sees me coming, because he knows
Pat's going to get you.
He's going to get the lecture.
I think that really, what strikes me with that too is based both on the community point, the value of community in parish, and then also kind of like in engaging in relationship with these new people, because the Lord is somehow going to reveal himself. we encounter the Lord. We see the Lord's presence through the people in our life. I think that's really important because people might ask, well, there's this whole line, spiritual versus religious,
Right.
um,
Spiritual, but not religious.
where I don't really need to be a part of an organized religion or an organized community or anything like that. I'll just go out in the woods and pray myself. I'll just, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We hear it. We really need other people in order to know the Lord and to come to know the Lord. I mean, so first of all, let us always remember that the Lord is other people, in the sense he is another person. He's not ourselves. He's not, he's not just this, he's not an inner voice that I've made up within me, but
And
he's outside of,
he shows up in unexpected places.
and he does, yeah. And he's taken on human flesh in Jesus Christ, and, he's another person. But also through all these other people in our lives, he continues to make himself known, to show up, in unexpected ways, and to reveal himself. And I think we really cheat ourselves if we think that Christianity is somehow just some private exercise, like it's just about doing nice things and making some time to pray. That it really is an engagement in relationship.
Yeah, it really has to be. It has to be. You can't really do this by yourself, and you have to interact with other people, and that's always valuable. I think.
Yeah.
You just never know where Christ is going to show up.
And even when other people, what someone used to tell me all the time is, I love the church. It's just the people. And but I think the fact is part of that of encountering the Lord and other people is sometimes the suffering that we experience because of other people. And nonetheless, the Lord is present in that and somehow working in that, and that we can come to know the Lord even through that experience.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. As we kind of wrap up these series of conversations, Pat, first of all, thank you for
you're welcome.
for your precious time. I did want to, I did want to bring up your work at Ohio Health, and
Okay.
I've often turned to you for advice on dealing with, as we just spoke about, dealing with difficult people. And what was your role there at?
I started actually at Grant. That was before they merged with Ohio Health in inpatient psychiatry.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, went to work with the family medicine residency in basically working with family medicine to be doctors in terms of their interaction with patients and communication and those kind of things. And so it was seeing patients with the doctors, trying to get them to really listen to the patient and look at more than just, what are these symptoms, and put your little machine away and stop that. In fact, when we got electronic medical records, I told my people, I said, if I see you put your hand on that mouse before you engage the patient, I'm going to smack your hand. And really learning to listen to people. But they're all, again, with the people that you see in those situations, a lot of times they're in, serious situations. There's medical issues, there's family issues, there's, all kinds of problems of life issues that interfere. You can't just look at, okay, well, this person has stomach pain. Yeah, well, what else is going on?
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my role, that, and then also ethics. So it was professionalism and ethics and doctor-patient communication and those kinds of things. Yeah. So that was my job with them. And it was really fun. It was great working with these doctors. I was just saying beforehand, it's hard to find a family doctor because I know most of them, and sometimes too well.
Yeah.
So it's like, gee, do I want to go to this person?
There may be the possibility that they wouldn't take you on.
That
too.
could be, yeah, there is that possibility. I can think of a couple where that definitely would be a possibility, but it was really, really interesting and fun to deal with them. And, of course, psychiatry, too. I was talking with a couple of the seminarians. We were at Panera killing time and talking about, psychiatry and people that, that now we look at the homeless, and so many of them have psychiatric issues, and there's really no place for them anymore.
Yeah.
There's no safe place that's, not like an institution, but, if we had something that was more like an assisted living kind of thing for psychiatric patients. So that was interesting, and, I found some really evil people. I worked for Children's Services for a while, doing abuse investigations, and I met a couple people that I was convinced were just evil.
Yeah.
Just evil. So, but it was fun. It's interesting. Everybody has a story.
And I think that's a good point for us to end on is, we're in this world with a whole bunch of other people. Beautifully, the Lord puts these people in our lives, whether we want to or not. But it's through that we really come to know him ever more. And I think that kind of good bedside manner that we all need in our interactions is, I think, a great takeaway from our time here today.
Yeah, there's always a reason that person is there. You might not know it at the time, but there are a lot of people I think back now and like, oh, this is what I learned from that person. It took me a while to put it all together, but they're there for a reason.
Yeah. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Conversations on Discipleship. I'm your host, Father Adam Streitenberger. With me today has been Pat Martin. Until next time, peace and all good.
A Diocese of Columbus production in partnership with St. Gabriel Catholic Radio.